At 8 p.m., we sat at a restaurant. A man stormed over, pointed at me, and said, "Who the hell is this?" My fiancée froze. I remember the exact time because I had glanced at my watch right before everything happened. It was 8 p.m., a Friday night, the kind where restaurants hum with chatter and clinking glasses. I had taken Hannah out for dinner at one of her favorite places, a cozy but slightly upscale spot downtown. She had picked the restaurant earlier in the week, and I hadn't thought much of it. At that point, I still trusted her completely. The evening had started off well enough. We ordered a bottle of wine, and she had been unusually affectionate, reaching across the table, brushing my hand, laughing a little louder than usual. I thought she was just in a good mood. I didn't realize at the time that her behavior wasn't affection, it was nervousness. There was a tension under her smile I couldn't name, something hidden in her eyes. The food had just arrived when it happened. A man stormed over from across the room, moving with the kind of confidence that comes from anger. He didn't hesitate. He came straight to our table, stopping at the edge, looming over me, and pointing his finger directly at me like I was some intruder in his house. His voice was loud enough that the nearby tables fell silent. "Who the hell is this?" At first, I froze. I had no idea who he was talking about. Then I realized he was pointing at me. His eyes weren't on me, though. They were locked on Hannah. I turned to her, expecting her to laugh it off, to tell him he was mistaken. But she didn't. She froze completely, like a rabbit caught in headlights. Her face went pale, her lips parted, and for a long second, she didn't make a sound. That silence told me more than any explanation could have. The man slammed his hand against the table, rattling our glasses. "Tell me, Hannah, who is he?" My stomach twisted. The name, he knew her name. And the way he said it wasn't casual. It was familiar, bitter, like they'd fought before. I stared at her, waiting for her to explain, but her mouth just opened and closed uselessly. She looked like she might cry or faint. People around us were staring now, whispering. Finally, she stammered something about a misunderstanding, that he was just a friend, that he was upset. But her voice cracked, and it sounded like a bad lie even to my ears. The man ignored her. He turned his full attention on me. "She told me she was single. We've been together for months. And now I see her here, with you." His eyes narrowed, searching my face for recognition. "So what are you supposed to be, her backup?" My head spun. I wanted to deny it, to believe this guy was lying, but Hannah's face gave it all away. She wasn't denying it. She wasn't even trying. I kept my voice level, though inside my chest was pounding. "I think you should leave." He leaned in closer, his jaw tight. "You don't know the half of it." I could feel Hannah's hand shaking under the table as she tried to grip mine, but I pulled away. I didn't want to touch her. Not then. Not with every eye in the restaurant fixed on us. The perfect little couple who had just been exposed as a lie. The man finally turned and walked out, but not before muttering something under his breath that I couldn't quite catch. Hannah tried to say something once he was gone, but I stood up, dropped some cash on the table, and told her we were leaving. The walk home was silent. She tried once or twice to speak, but I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mind was replaying the scene over and over. The way he had said her name. The way she had frozen. The way she hadn't denied it. When we got back to the apartment, she locked herself in the bathroom under the pretense of needing a shower. I sat in the living room, staring at the dark TV screen, my thoughts spinning. For the first time since we'd been together, I started replaying old memories with suspicion. Every late-night text she'd hidden from me, every excuse about yoga class running late, every work trip that hadn't quite added up. All those little inconsistencies I'd brushed aside suddenly sharpened into a pattern. I wasn't angry yet. Not in the way people expect. I was cold. A heavy, unsettling calm washed over me. And in that calm, I realized I needed to know everything. I needed proof. When she finally emerged from the shower, wrapped in a towel, her phone was left carelessly on the counter. She went into the bedroom, humming softly as if pretending nothing had happened. I walked into the bathroom, picked up the phone, and unlocked it. She had given me her code months ago, back when I thought trust was unshakable. The screen lit up with messages. My hands felt almost detached from my body as I scrolled. There they were. Long threads of texts with the man from the restaurant. His name was Patrick. The messages left no room for doubt. She wasn't just cheating, she was living a double life. They talked about plans, about weekends away, about excuses she'd given me. She even mocked me in some of the texts, calling me predictable, saying I'd never suspect a thing. And then I saw something that made my chest tighten further. Another message thread, this time with her cousin, Marlene. The two of them were laughing about how easily I believed everything Hannah said. Her cousin was covering for her, helping her maintain her lies by backing up her stories. That discovery burned worse than anything else. Not only was my fiancée lying, but people close to her, people who smiled at me during family gatherings, were in on it. I closed the phone, set it back exactly where it had been, and walked quietly into the bedroom. Hannah was lying in bed, scrolling on the TV remote like it was any other night. She glanced up and smiled, but I could see the tightness around her eyes. I didn't say a word. I lay down beside her, pretending to drift off to sleep. But inside, I was wide awake, every nerve on edge. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to demand answers. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to watch. I was going to collect proof. And then I was going to dismantle the entire house of lies she had built. That night was the turning point. The moment the world I thought I knew shifted into something darker, sharper, and far more dangerous. And it had all started with a man storming into a restaurant at 8 p.m. and pointing at me like I was the stranger. The night after the restaurant incident, I hardly slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Patrick's face, red with anger, eyes full of betrayal, as he stood at our table and demanded answers. But what cut deeper wasn't him. It was Hannah's silence. Silence can be louder than words, and hers had screamed guilt. I replayed what I had read on her phone until dawn. The texts, the lies, the cousin's involvement. It was all swirling around me like smoke I couldn't breathe through. By the time the sun rose, I knew what I had to do. If I confronted her too soon, she would twist the story, claim paranoia, and lean on her cousin to back her up. I couldn't let that happen. I needed undeniable evidence. So I watched her. For the first time in years, I became deliberate about noticing everything. When she got dressed, I noted the details. When she said she was meeting friends, I checked the time she left and the time she returned. When she claimed she was exhausted from work, I watched how her energy shifted the moment her phone buzzed. It didn't take long to see the patterns. That Tuesday, she said she had a late yoga class. I had always believed that story before. This time, I decided to follow her. I waited until she left, gave her a head start, then grabbed my keys and drove a separate route. My heart hammered the whole time, not from fear of being caught, but from the certainty of what I was about to confirm. She didn't drive to the studio. She drove straight to a rundown motel on the edge of town. I parked far enough away to watch without being seen. Minutes later, Patrick's car pulled up. He stepped out, glanced around, and went inside. She followed. The sight of them disappearing into that room together should have crushed me. But instead, I felt a strange clarity. Pain was there, yes, but it was sharper, cleaner, almost like adrenaline. It confirmed what I had already known but refused to say out loud. I waited. An hour passed. Then two. When they finally emerged, they didn't look guilty. They looked comfortable, like people who had been repeating this ritual for months. Hannah brushed his shoulder as they walked, and he kissed her cheek casually, like a habit. I gripped my steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. Then I raised my phone and took several photos. The glow of the motel sign above them, the timestamp on the images, it was all locked in. I wanted to believe this would be the worst of it, but some part of me knew I had only scratched the surface. That weekend, I decided to push further. Instead of confronting Hannah, I reached out to Patrick directly. Not as myself, of course. I set up a fake profile, posed as a casual acquaintance from the gym where he occasionally went, and struck up a conversation online. It didn't take long before he was bragging about a woman he was seeing. He didn't give her name at first, but he described her too well for it to be anyone else. Her hair, her smile, even her habit of pretending she was busy with family whenever she disappeared. When I hinted that she might be engaged, his reaction was immediate. He laughed, said she wasn't, and insisted she lived with a roommate, not a fiancé. That detail told me everything. Hannah had lied to both of us, constructing two completely different lives. I let the conversation play out long enough to confirm every detail. Patrick truly believed she was single. He wasn't some villain trying to steal her away. He was another victim. That realization twisted my stomach. She wasn't just cheating. She was running two parallel stories, using me for stability and him for whatever thrill she was chasing. But then came the detail that stopped me cold. When Patrick described how they arranged their meetups, he mentioned her cousin Marlene. He said she sometimes acted as a cover, making excuses so Hannah could sneak out. He even mentioned a family trip where Marlene had lied on Hannah's behalf so she could meet him at the beach. The confirmation burned like acid. It wasn't just a suspicion anymore. Her cousin really was involved. And if Marlene was covering for her, how many others in her family knew? The next few days were a blur of gathering proof. I installed a small recording app on Hannah's phone when she left it unattended. I set up a cloud sync to capture the conversations remotely. Each file that appeared confirmed my suspicions. Whispered plans, secret arrangements, mocking laughter about how gullible I was. It was like peeling layers off a rotting onion. Every new discovery stank worse than the last. One night, she came home late again. She tossed her bag onto the couch, kissed my cheek absent-mindedly, and went to shower. While she was distracted, I checked the app. The latest recording made my blood run cold. It wasn't just Patrick. There was mention of another man. Someone closer to home, as she put it. She told Marlene that she liked keeping options open, that if Patrick ever got too clingy, she had another plan already set up. I sat in silence, listening to her voice say those words. Every shred of doubt I might have clung to had vanished. She wasn't confused. She wasn't pressured. She wasn't making a mistake. She was calculating. Cold. She was planning her life around lies. That weekend, I tested her. I told her I'd be out of town for work. I wasn't. I stayed close to the apartment, parked down the street. Sure enough, less than an hour after I left, Patrick arrived. They spent the night together in my apartment, my bed, my space, the home I had built for us. I could see them through the window. That image is burned into me forever, but I didn't rage. I didn't smash the door open. I just waited, took photos, documented every moment. The next morning, when Patrick left, Hannah acted like nothing had happened. She kissed me when I returned, as if the bed hadn't still been warm from someone else. That was the breaking point. Not the betrayal itself. I had already known about that, but the sheer audacity of her pretending. The confidence with which she lied to my face, secure in the belief that I would never catch on. But I had, and now I had everything I needed. I didn't confront her that day. Instead, I went to see Marlene. I didn't announce my visit. I showed up at her place, knocked on the door, and waited. She looked shocked to see me, nervous even. That nervousness gave her away before I said a word. I kept my tone casual, asking about Hannah, about whether she'd mentioned anything lately. Marlene stammered through her answers, eyes darting. I could almost see the gears turning in her head as she tried to figure out what I knew. I left without pressing further, but her reaction told me enough. She wasn't on it. Maybe not all of it, but enough to be dangerous. Driving home, I realized I was standing at the edge of something bigger than a simple betrayal. This wasn't just about one affair. It was a web, a network of lies and cover-ups, stretching from Hannah to Patrick and through her own family. And if she was bold enough to bring Patrick into my apartment, if her cousin was bold enough to cover for her, then the next step wouldn't just be confrontation. It would have to be exposure. But exposure required precision. If I moved too fast, she would play the victim, twist it back on me, and her family would rally behind her. If I moved too slow, she would continue to use me until she no longer needed me. So I made a plan. First, I'd let her trap herself. Let her believe I was still blind, still the predictable man she mocked in her messages. I'd gather every bit of evidence, texts, recordings, photos, until the case was airtight. Then, when the moment came, I would put it all in front of her. Not in private, not where she could cry and manipulate me, but in front of everyone who mattered, her family, Patrick, anyone who had been part of her lies. I wanted her world to collapse exactly the way mine had at that restaurant. Sudden, public, irreversible. That night, as she curled up beside me, pretending to be tired from work, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. She thought I was predictable. She thought I was blind. But she had no idea that the ground beneath her had already started to crack. By the time another week passed, I had more than enough evidence. I had recordings of her calls, screenshots of texts, and photos of her slipping into motels or welcoming Patrick into our apartment. Every piece of her life was mapped against mine, and none of it aligned. She thought she was weaving an invisible thread of lies, but I was pulling them out one by one until I had a rope strong enough to hang the truth. I had spent days deciding how to confront her. If I confronted her privately, she'd deny, cry, manipulate. If I shouted, she'd say I was unstable. If I stayed quiet, she'd keep using me. The only way forward was to strip away her ability to lie. That meant witnesses. That meant timing. I invited her parents over for dinner on Saturday. I told Hannah I wanted to celebrate our engagement properly since we'd been too busy lately. She brightened at the idea, no doubt seeing it as a chance to polish her image as the devoted fiancé. She spent the day cooking, cleaning, setting the table. What she didn't know was that I had already contacted Patrick. I told him the truth, that she was engaged to me. At first, he didn't believe it. I sent him photos of our apartment, of her things, of us together at events. The shock in his silence over the phone was almost palpable. He agreed to come. He wanted answers too. So the stage was set. Hannah, her parents, Patrick, and me. The evening began smoothly enough. Her parents were cheerful, complimenting the meal, asking about wedding plans. Hannah played her part flawlessly, smiling, holding my hand, laughing at the right moments. If anyone had walked in then, they'd think we were the perfect couple. I waited until after dessert to begin. I leaned back in my chair, calm, collected, and said I had something to share. Hannah's parents looked at me curiously. Hannah froze, sensing the shift in my tone. I started small. I mentioned the man from the restaurant, how he had stormed up to us, and how she hadn't denied knowing him. Her parents frowned, confused, turning to her for explanation. She stammered, claiming he was just a friend who had misread the situation. I nodded, pretending to accept that. Then I pulled out my phone. I showed them the first set of photos, the motel parking lot, her and Patrick walking out together, his hand brushing her shoulder. Her parents gasped. Hannah's face drained of color. She immediately shifted tactics, claiming it was one time, a mistake, something she regretted. I let her speak. Then I played one of the recordings. Her voice filled the room, laughing with Patrick about how gullible I was, mocking the very trust her parents thought we shared. Her mother covered her mouth. Her father's face darkened. Hannah started to cry, reaching across the table, trying to grab my hand. But I wasn't finished. That's when I stood and opened the door. Patrick walked in. The room fell silent. Hannah's sobs stopped instantly, replaced by sheer panic. Patrick looked at her with a mixture of hurt and rage. "You told me you weren't engaged," he said flatly. Her parents turned to her, their eyes wide. Hannah tried to speak, but no words came. She was cornered. Every possible lie she might have spun was collapsing under the weight of undeniable proof. She tried one last desperate attempt, saying I had set her up, that I was trying to humiliate her. But Patrick cut her off. He pulled out his own phone and read aloud her messages to him. The ones where she claimed she lived with a roommate. The ones where she promised him she'd leave the boring guys soon enough. Her parents looked shattered. They had raised their daughter to believe in family values, and now she was exposed as someone who had built her future on lies. But I wasn't done. I had saved the worst for last. I pulled out bank statements. I laid them on the table, page by page. Thousands of dollars missing from our joint account, transferred into an account she controlled alone. Money she claimed was for wedding planning. In reality, she had been using it to fund her weekends with Patrick, trips, hotel rooms, gifts. Her father's voice broke the silence, low and sharp. "Is this true?" Hannah's face crumpled. She tried to say it wasn't what it looked like, but every document, every receipt, every message said otherwise. The air in the room was suffocating. Her parents sat in stunned silence. Patrick shook his head, disgusted, and walked out without another word. Hannah reached for me again, desperate, but I stood, collected the papers, and looked her dead in the eyes. "I don't think we have anything left to discuss." She broke then. She dropped to her knees, crying, begging me to reconsider, saying she'd fix everything, that she'd been confused, that she'd been under pressure. Her parents didn't even move to comfort her. They just sat there, ashamed, realizing their daughter wasn't who they thought she was. I didn't scream. I didn't gloat. I simply walked to the bedroom, packed a small bag of essentials, and left the apartment. But I wasn't finished with her. In the days that followed, I made sure the truth spread. I sent the evidence to her siblings, her cousins, her closest friends. Not out of spite, but because I refused to let her control the narrative. She wasn't going to paint me as paranoid or unstable. The facts spoke for themselves, and I made sure everyone saw them. The fallout was immediate. Her family pulled their financial support for the wedding. Her friends distanced themselves. Patrick told me he was done with her completely. But the biggest blow came when her employer got wind of the scandal. She worked in a position where trust and integrity mattered, and when the recordings and financial misuse surfaced, she was suspended. Eventually, she lost her job. Meanwhile, I moved out permanently, closed the joint account, and reclaimed what was left of my money. It wasn't about revenge, it was about survival. She had nearly drained me dry, emotionally and financially. By exposing her, I cut her power off at the source. The image of her kneeling on the floor, begging as her world collapsed, stayed with me. Not because I pitied her, but because it was the moment I realized how dangerous blind trust can be. I had trusted Hannah completely. She had turned that trust into a weapon. But when the truth came out, she had nothing left to fight with. And now, for the first time in months, I felt like I could finally breathe again. When I walked out of that apartment with my bag slung over my shoulder, I thought I might feel empty. Instead, I felt clear. Cold, yes, but clear. For the first time in months, maybe years, I wasn't stumbling blindly through the life someone else was scripting for me. I had taken back control, and Hannah's entire facade had cracked in front of the people whose opinions mattered most to her. The next morning, my phone was buzzing with missed calls and messages. All from her. Dozens of them. Apologies, pleas, excuses. I didn't answer a single one. I had learned that engaging with her only gave her a chance to twist the story. Silence was my sharpest weapon now. Instead, I called my bank. I froze the joint account, reclaimed the portion of my savings that was rightfully mine, and blocked her access. I contacted the landlord of our apartment, explained the situation, and removed my name from the lease. By lunchtime, every legal and financial tie I had to her was cut. She couldn't touch me anymore. That afternoon, I got a call from her father. His voice was weary, like he'd aged a decade overnight. He apologized, not for her, but to me, for allowing her to drag me this far before the truth surfaced. He said their family was ashamed, that they had confronted her after I left, and that she had broken down completely. He admitted they had given her money over the past year for wedding expenses, money she had claimed was for deposits and catering. But those funds were gone, siphoned away just like mine. It was one thing to lie to me. It was another to lie to her own parents, who had been ready to support her in building a future. That was when they realized they couldn't protect her anymore. The fallout spread quickly. Word of the confrontation traveled through her family like wildfire. Cousins, aunts, uncles. All the people who had once smiled at our engagement parties now looked at her with disdain. Marlene, the cousin who had covered for her, tried to defend herself by saying she had just been helping. But no one was buying it. She became collateral damage, branded as complicit in Hannah's lies. Patrick didn't stick around either. Within days, he messaged me again, not to reconcile, but to let me know he was done with her. He had seen enough proof with his own eyes, and he wasn't interested in being anyone's second choice. Whatever twisted thrill she had given him wasn't worth the humiliation of being lied to about something as serious as an engagement. Hannah tried to pivot after that. She sent long emails saying she had been lost, that she had been confused about commitment, that she had made mistakes she was ready to fix. Each message was longer than the last, dripping with apologies and promises to change. But the more she wrote, the clearer it became that she wasn't sorry for what she had done. She was sorry she had been caught. I didn't reply, but I wasn't completely free yet. The next wave came from her workplace. A week after the confrontation, a mutual friend told me her company had suspended her. She worked in event planning, and integrity was essential in that industry. Clients trusted her with money and logistics. When rumors of her financial manipulation in her personal life reached the office, her manager confronted her. She tried to downplay it, but the receipts I had shared with her parents eventually surfaced in professional circles too. That was enough. Within a month, she was let go. Her career, her family support, her engagement, everything had unraveled in less than 30 days. As for me, I focused on rebuilding. I stayed with a friend for a while, then moved into a small but comfortable apartment of my own. The silence at night felt strange at first, but it was a clean kind of silence, not the heavy, suffocating quiet I used to feel when Hannah was lying beside me, texting someone else under the covers. I poured my time into work, into hobbies I had neglected, into reconnecting with friends I hadn't seen as often, because she always had some excuse not to go out. Slowly, I started to feel like myself again. Not the man who had been betrayed, but the man who had survived it. But the story didn't end there. Months later, I bumped into one of Hannah's old co-workers at a cafe. She told me Hannah had tried to get another job, but had been rejected after references fell through. She was working part-time in retail now, barely scraping by. Her parents had stopped giving her money, insisting she needed to stand on her own. And Patrick? He had blocked her completely. The irony wasn't lost on me. She had once mocked me to him as the predictable one, the boring backup. And yet, when the dust settled, I was the one who walked away with my dignity intact, while she was left scrambling for scraps of the life she had thrown away. I never gloated. I never rubbed it in. That wasn't necessary. Life itself had already handed her the bill. There was one final chapter, though. About 6 months after the confrontation, I got a letter in the mail. It was from her. Handwritten, pages long. She said she had been in therapy, that she was trying to understand why she sabotaged everything. She begged for a chance to talk, to apologize properly. She said she still loved me, that she wanted to rebuild, that she would do anything if I just gave her one more chance. I didn't respond. Not because I hated her. Hate would have given her power. But because the man who had sat in that restaurant at 8 p.m. months earlier, blindsided by another man pointing at him and demanding answers, no longer existed. I wasn't that man anymore. I was someone who had looked betrayal in the eye, gathered every piece of evidence, exposed the lies, and walked away intact. The consequences belonged to her. And that's how it ended. Not with shouting, not with revenge, but with silence. A silence that spoke louder than anything she could ever say. And that's the story. If you're still here, that means you're one of us. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button. I drop new chaos every single day, and trust me, tomorrow's story, it's even worse than this one.